Guys, it's Dan here, and today I'm going to be talking about the Black Prism by Brent, which is the first book in the Lightbringer trilogy, and it is like an epic fantasy. Now, the plot in this novel is like heavily linked to the magic system. It's a really in-depth magic system, so I'll kind of try and explain that a little bit before I start. Now, it's called chromaturgy, and it's based around colours and light. You've got magic users, which are called drafters in the book, and they can use one or more of like 7 colours in order to draw power for their magic. And like each of these colours has like a different magical effect. Now, in the world that Brent has created, you got these kingdoms, these 7 kingdoms. They're called the 7 satrapies, so a bit of a Persian thing going on there, I guess. And they're like all notionally ruled over by this emperor figure called the Prism, who is the most powerful magic user, and he's the only magic user in the world that can use all 7 colours. But it's more of he's an emperor, but actually he's more of kind of a figurehead. He's got like a religious role rather than, a political as well, but the kingdoms are kind of ruled by their own satraps. And he, like I say, just is a figurehead. And the current Prism is a guy called Gavin Guile, and he came to power after a sort of devastating war against his brother, who could also use all the 7 colours. And Gavin is sort of more active in his role than a lot of other Prisms apparently have been. And he sort of goes around and he tries to keep peace now between these 7 satrapies, and also hunts down these things called colour whites, which are sort of like it's what happens in this world when magic users use too much magic. It causes them to sort of go insane, and they become these sort of monster type things that, yeah, as I say, Gavin hunts down. So that's kind of the absolute basics of the magic system and a bit of the world. But it's a really complex system, and that there's way more to it in the book. It's kind of on a level with, I don't know if you've read, say, the Mistborn series by Brandon Sanderson. You know, it's that level of complexity and thought that's gone into it. So yeah, in this book we follow a few different characters. The main ones sort of being the Gavin Guile, the Prism. There's also this sort of provincial farm boy type kids called Kip. There's Corvan Danavis, who is like a drafter from Kip's village. His past is kind of revealed a bit throughout the book, so I won't go too much into that. And there's also Liv, who is Corvan's daughter, and she's also a drafter, but she's not based in the same village as Kip and Corvan. She is at a place called the Chromaria, which is kind of like a political powerhouse / university for training these magic users. It's kind of like, it reminds me of, if you've read The Wheel of Time, it reminds me of the White Tower in The Wheel of Time. And the main plot really involves Gavin trying to put down a rebellion in one of the satrapies. But honestly, there's so many twists and different reveals that you can't really go too much into the plot without giving loads away. So I won't. So yeah, is it any good? Well, look, to be honest, I found this book really frustrating, right? Because Brent does a bunch of stuff really well. His writing is really high level in some aspects, and then it's just really let down by other bits of it. You know, whenever I sort of found myself getting really into the story, one of these like niggles would pop up and it would just bring me right out of it. So, you know, even though I am quite intrigued by how the trilogy could progress, I'm not sure I can put up with reading through another 2 books of these faults. So if that's, you know, if they continue like that, please, you know, and you've read it, please let me know, because otherwise I'm probably not going to bother carrying on with it. But anyway, first let's talk about, you know, the positives. What does this book do well? I mean, the obvious one is the magic system. Like I say, there's so much thought that has gone into that. You know, I did have some problems with it, but I'll talk about them later. Yeah, so it's a really in-depth system. It's got clear limits and costs for the users. You know, for example, that it's based on light, so when it's dark, nighttime, whatever, the magic users are significantly less powerful. Also, with the single exception of the Prism, you know, Gavin, they can only use a certain amount of magic in their lifetime before they go insane and become one of these monster colour white things. And if they use a lot of magic in a short space of time, then they get this thing called light sickness, which is kind of like just having a mad hangover. And I thought that Brent Weeks' world building did a really good job of incorporating all of these elements of the magic system into the culture of these 7 satrapies. You know, permeates every aspect of it, really. So I thought that was done really well. The plot itself was full of twists and surprises. It kept me guessing all the way through. There's plenty of action through there, and the pacing was really fast, which I enjoy. And there's a couple of really interesting characters in there as well. I initially thought that Gavin would be just way too overpowered, but actually, as the book went on and you find out more about him, I did end up becoming, much more invested in his character. And I also thought that Liv's character specifically had a really nice character arc. It felt like a really organic, natural progression where she ended up in the book. Like I said, I can't reveal too much. But yeah, it felt like a real natural progression for her after her sort of internal struggles with her place in the world. And the overall cast of characters was really sort of ethnically diverse, and that actually had significant impacts for the world building and for the magic system. So I thought that was pretty well considered. But yeah, so now that's done, I'll tell you why I'm probably not going to read the rest of this trilogy anytime soon, which is a shame because I was really looking forward. I heard really good things about this book, so I was looking forward to reading it. But, you know, first off, let's get this out of the way. I saw a bunch of reviews on YouTube that said that there was a lot of sexism in the book, and having read it, yeah, I can see where they're coming from in that. Now, you know, it's one thing having characters who are sexist because of their background, their upbringing, their environment, whatever. But it wasn't just that. There was elements of the narration outside of the characters' sort of internal dialogues, or external dialogues for that matter, that just made it seem like Brent Weeks himself was being sort of offhandedly sexist, or and also there was a couple of characters. Well, in fact, one character in particular, Caris, who's supposed to be this like really powerful female figure, you know, strong female character, and and she was doing it herself, like, which it just didn't make sense to me for her character. So, you know, that combined with the fact it's in the narration doesn't, in my eyes, look very good for Brent Weeks. So yeah, also the magic system, right? So the magic system is one of the most well thought out, most fleshed out systems that I've read, definitely. But because of the fact that it's colour based and all of the magic they're casting is, you know, in the colour that they can use or whatever, in my head I couldn't help picturing it like every sort of fight scene or every action scene was an episode of Power Rangers, if you remember that show, you know, where they're all dressed in their primary colours. And yeah, so it seemed that just felt a bit silly to me, but that's just my personal reaction, how I pictured it in my head, and so I get that's a personal thing. And one of the main characters, like, who you get a load of POV of, Yeah, Kip. Oh man, he's annoying. Yeah, he's got a complete lack of self-respect when you're in his internal monologue, right? But then Brent Weeks has him doing all this like really heroic stuff with not enough build up of him getting over this lack of self-respect in my mind. It just didn't seem like the kind of stuff that someone with his mindset would do. And also, yeah, we get it, Brent. He's fat. You don't need to say it every other page. I mean, that got really annoying. So yeah, anyway, right, rant over. And like I said, don't go away thinking that this book is all bad. It had some things that definitely annoyed me enough that I'm probably not going to be reading it. But like I said at the start, there's some really good writing mixed in with that as well. So if you can forgive those flaws, more than I can, then maybe you'll like it. But yeah, I mean, if you do like the sound of that, or if you've read it and you did enjoy it, then I'd highly recommend that you check out the Mistborn series that I mentioned earlier by Brandon Sanderson, which, I mean, for me, has a lot of the same strengths, but manages to really avoid some of the weaknesses that you see in the Black Prism. Also, The Eye of the World. So this is the first book in the Wheel of Time that I also mentioned earlier, by Robert Jordan. This is a huge commitment to get into because there's like 14 books and a novella in the series, but it's classic fantasy, and similar in terms of having like a strong magic system and the epic scale of it. So two recommendations there that I think for me are better than the Black Prism. So if you haven't read any of them, then read those two instead. Sorry, Brent. Alright, that's it then. Bye, I suppose.